Welcome, everyone. This public presentation is the culmination of a 4-culture heritage project grant awarded to the Ballard Historical Society in 2019. A 2-year project became a 3-year project thanks to the pandemic, but the product is the richer for it. As you can see from our screen, the Ballard Historical Society was formed in 1988, and the oral histories that make this up were part of its own birth. So the oral histories that inspired this project that were collected before the Ballard Centennial in 1989 also led to the founding of Ballard Historical Society, proving the point that history just isn't only in the past, its treasures are still to be uncovered, which is exactly what we have had the opportunity to do. Tonight, you're going to learn the process that was part of creating this incredible resource, a work in progress, I might add, but one that I hope will inspire you to become part of Ballard Historical Society's ongoing efforts. So whenever you hear the Ballard bell ring, for example, or perhaps the ghost of a trolley. Okay, Emily, you're on.
What if you were able to connect with the lives of people who lived and worked in Ballard 100 years ago? Using digital photo archives, oral history recordings, and innovative GIS mapping, you can. Like Maxine Shallow-Tuck, who grew up in Polish Town, northeast of the Ballard Bridge.
But the old streetcars coming across there, and then it was buses. The bus drivers used to say, well, you got your passports ready, we're going into Ballard. And we'd laugh, the old Ballardites,
And what they mean by passports?
Because it was a foreign country, it was Scandinavia.
Maxine's father worked for lumber baron, mill owner, and civic leader William Balcom. His mansion featured a $5,000 piano and a special wing to host visiting international musicians. In 1940, Balcom's mill on Salmon Bay burned to the ground. Again.
Well, have you ever seen cedar burn? The whole sky is brown. And it just hangs over the city for hours and hours.
Sakai Matsuda was born in Japan and also worked for Balcom. While Sakai and his family were incarcerated during World War II, neighbors watched over their Ballard home. Son Frank was part of the famous 442nd Army Regiment. He was awarded a U.S. Congressional Gold Medal in 2011. Vida Morrow Metcalf graduated from Ballard High School in 1918 and was a lawyer at the tender age of 22. In the 1930s, she worked on the New Deal for the Roosevelt administration and later went on to develop most of the Greenwood retail area.
I didn't need an organization to liberate me. I was born liberated.
Now you can connect and make your own discoveries. Visit the link below to get started.
I want to thank the National Nordic Museum board member, Anna Clausen, who's watching tonight, and also Laura Cooper for her buttering her up an event and convincing her to bring her talents of her co-worker, Zach Sweeten, as well to create that video for us. All right, so Mona says, Emily, I can't start until to stop you do it. Okay. All right. So once Emily stops the screen share, we are, I think over the last couple of years, we've become used to the Zoom meetings, but not to the webinar. So these are some of the resources that went into, actually, Mona, if you go back a second, we were got out of sync. So the first product that was part of a volunteer-led effort was the Passport to Ballard, which was the centennial story. And collecting many of those oral histories led to first Voices of Ballard and then the expanded book, Voices of Ballard and Beyond. And as you can see, it was an oral history project of the Nordic Heritage Museum, as it was then called, Ballard Historical Society, and the Swedish Finn Historical Society. And that was really the birth of the Ballard Historical Society back at that centennial time. So now to the third one. And you got a glimpse from the video of what our project is going to be like, and you're going to be seeing how it was made. But now we're going to back up just a little bit, and I would like to introduce, so yes, we can go to slide 4. I'd like to introduce Davidya Kasperzyk, because he was the one who really kind of gave birth to this whole thing. So there was a mapping historic Ballard project that you're going to hear about. So Davidya, I think I can, Emily, if you want to put him on the big screen, you can you can sort of pin him. Davidya Kasperzyk came to the Pacific Northwest in 1977 from graduate studies in anthropology and ecosystems. He wandered and tried to imagine how people and their civilization could inhabit this paradise. After a career as an architect and bioregional planner, his public work with the BHS has focused on capturing what remains of layers of human settlement using the best contemporary mapping technology. The goal being to create an accessible resource and database for our community. Welcome, Davidya. And in the photo, he's holding up a smartphone at the back at one of our training sessions. So go to it, Davidya.
Great, thank you, Peggy. It's a joy to be here, and thank you so many for coming. You can see in this picture of us from within the Ballard Library's public room. In the back, Laura Cooper, trustee, myself, Ballard Historic Society trustee, and Peggy. We were the core, along with the technical expertise of Matt Stevenson and Core GIS. And this was a training we did, which I think picked up on some roots in Ballard's recent history. The neighborhood planning effort of 91, 93 was an incredible citizen-based planning effort to come up with strategies for improving the open space and recreation qualities of the community. And we had over 1,000 people involved in that. So when the city and the population reality, our boom of the 19, basically since post World War II, it's been continuous. So the growth management properties in Washington State were really elevated in the 1990s. So when neighborhood planning came, it required the communities to do that kind of base surveying and strategic planning. One of the things that I think we got a little bit shorted on in Seattle's current zoning and demographic boom is that we didn't do that for planning. For example, identifying historic resources within the communities as a way of conserving the best of what's left, or integrating them into future development as we try to densify and prepare ourselves for the future. What Peggy has done here, after we three, Laura, Peggy, and I, kind of led that mapping historic Ballard process, is to personalize and bring forward the narratives that she just described. And that's really Peggy's forte. And I'd like to compliment her, exalt her for being that journalist, storyteller, and an educator that has really driven this project. And really proud of our relationship with the Ballard Historic Society. So back to this image that you're seeing. This was a training that Matt Stevenson did, and you can see this is a crowdsourced survey where we're trying to do as a nonprofit what the city could have done, and most planners, I'm a planner, architect, said should be done as you plan for the future. And so we picked up the ball. We worked with the city. The city was very gracious in giving us a Seattle Department of Neighborhoods small and maximum grant. And we, together with private funding and a lot of in-kind services and personal funding, we were able to put together an incredible project. We had over 100 volunteers who used smartphone technology and some great software that Matt Stevenson educated us as to existed and how to use it. And over the course of 3 to 6 months in 2016, we went out multiple times, walked the streets, and we surveyed over 7,800 buildings.
You ready for the next slide to show off what we did?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And so every night, this data, as it was being collected, was being brought forward, and we had different types of analysis we wanted to do. And what you're seeing here in the green and red is the green and red blocks are, the red are the select 150 buildings. We ended up with 160. We couldn't help ourselves. They were just, these were the select buildings that we thought were exemplary to the community and also showed various class and building typology differences of value in our community. We tried to very hard to balance, you can see, balance the community out. It's not a star architecture kind of tour. The blue are the next level. We had over 500 of those vintage buildings. And we got this 160 onto the city's historic register, which I think is a real accomplishment. But I have to add that there's very little actual protection beyond being on the city's historic resource list. The city and our community needs to make sure that gets improved. The next image is kind of a real classic for me. You can see the draw up. This is an interactive map. You can go in and click on these. And then that image here that you're seeing here of a really a classic 4-square type farmhouse right up on 28th. You can get information about the year it was built, type, we delineated the type, architectural style, and a number of other categories.
Also,
the next slide.
That Davidya had the foresight to have us map exceptional trees that were on the property. So in addition to doing structures, we added a whole nother layer by creating a tree survey.
Can I get that next image, please? There it is. So nice colors, huh? It's psychedelic. What is meaningful to this is north of 58th Street. The bottom gray line is the Ballard Commons is kind of central there. So it's north of the Ballard Commons, 58th Street, all the way up to 85th, and then to the east, 8th, all the way to the Bluff. I didn't want to do this much, but people just kept pushing, and we did this much. And it was exhaustive, but at the same time, what we captured is, I think, really critical kind of for future planning. What leaps out here is, if you know the zoning, the multifamily is down where you're seeing the green in the core above the park. That's where there's multifamily zoning. And the dark, deepest red, those are structures and facilities that are over 100 years old. This is a really significant number of buildings. This was like 2,200 buildings were over 100 years old as of this snapshot in 2016. The reality is, I think you understand that a number of those are going away, and you can see that actually happening in the green in that core of historic Ballard. So this is that north central church district that I still feel would have high value for the city, looking at a district like this and identifying it as a potentially useful historic resource district. So this is something that we captured this snapshot. We did land use, we did a couple other things, but what it does is it shows the power of crowdsourcing, using local easy technology. Matt will tell us how quite not easy this is, but for us, getting to this point with a citizen-based crowdsourced effort shows that the neighborhood really cares about its character, its community, and now we have a database that we can work with to plan for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Davidya. Okay. Next slide, because here's where it comes back around. Davidya got me into this. Laura Cooper got me into this. Allison Dreimer is shown there. We got so caught up in this, and because 30 plus years ago, volunteers recorded almost 100 oral histories. And the problem is that not all of them were transcribed. And even those that were included in the anthologies were excerpted. So when Laura kind of stumbled back on some of the files and the tape cassettes and the cassettes in the basement of the neighborhood center, she realized that we needed to save them before they were gone. And so thanks to this For Culture grant, we were able to have them digitized and start to listen with new ears while using the newly available digital archives, such as the Seattle PI being put online, and with help from MOHI, University of Washington, City of Seattle, especially the Seattle room at the Central Library. We took those oral histories, we found some people that had been overlooked, and we researched and added photos, news clippings, and census information. Now, Ballard Historical Society members have many talents, but geographic information systems are not included. So Matt Stevenson was, even though he knew us too well after probably the last project, he was willing to come back on board. Matt, with CoreGIS, specializes in cartography, spatial analysis, web mapping, conservation planning, and GIS project management. He works primarily with government agencies and nonprofits focused on conservation and restoration. He has 20 years of experience using GIS to convey complex spatial information with striking cartography and eye-catching graphics, which we will now show and prove. So, do you have to give him control, Emily, or can you seize it, Matt?
I am in the process of seizing.
Perfect.
Yes. All right. Can everyone see a slide that says mapping a many-to-many relationship?
Yes, yes.
All right. So Peggy's self-deprecation notwithstanding, I love working with BHS. These folks are doing really important work, and they come up with some of the most interesting technological challenges that I've had the pleasure to work on. And this project was no exception. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about how we used technology to bring all of the historical documents, transcripts, and recordings that Peggy just described to life through a map. So the first challenge that we encountered was this many-to-many relationship. And what I mean by that is, as you can see on the left, we have lots of people. These are the folks who provided their stories through the oral histories. These people talk about lots of different places. Maybe the house that they grew up in, the house that they lived in at the time of the interview, where they worked, where they recreated. Maybe there was a social club that they went to. So for each person, there was almost always more than one place. And for every place that we mapped, there was almost always more than one person that was associated with it. And in order to solve that, we had to come up with a people to places linking table. This was the secret sauce that made everything work together on the map. And everything that you're about to see is the result of many hundreds, if not thousands, of collective hours of the volunteers that Peggy mentioned, who worked really hard to make all of these things work together. And I just had to put it on the map. Okay, so let's go to the next one. All right, so the data sources. The way that we worked together, because it was a pandemic, was all distributed. The data were gathered using Google Sheets. We had multiple worksheets to collect the information about all of the people that we wanted to feature on the map. In GIS lingo, we call that attributes. And those attributes for people and places were in different worksheets. We had the MP3 files of the audio interviews, PDFs of the transcripts that were created from those audio interviews, and then some really interesting photos of those folks. So you could see what they look like as you're listening to their stories. So these colors of Google Sheets, MP3, PDFs, and photos are going to be important for the next slide. And this one will also be important because we had all of that information, and then we had to use a bunch of different technologies to get that information to display properly. So we used a computer coding language called Python to translate the information stored in Google Sheets to mappable XY coordinates. And the map itself is powered by Mapbox. They have a couple of different products that we used. The first of these was Mapbox Studio. That provided the base map, or sort of the catcher's mitt, for all of the information we were throwing at the map. And we were able to configure the way that information was being displayed using the Mapbox API called GLJS. And if any of you are technical people who want to dive deeper into this with me, I'd be happy to follow up with you after tonight's presentation. We had to bring in yet another bit of coding expertise from my collaborator, Eldon Goldenberg, called jQuery, to enable multiple people to appear in a single pop-up at one of the places. And then finally, just plain old HTML and CSS to style up the web page and power the zoom to a person functionality. So how does that all work together? Well, starting on the left, we have information. We have the attributes or the characteristics of the people in the Google Sheets. We also have a whole bunch of information associated with those people, the interviews, the transcripts, the images, etc. The Python converts the Google Sheets into GeoJSON, which goes on to the map through Mapbox Studio, and GLJS, which is what you're seeing in the image on the top right. And then it converts some of the non-spatial information into another format called JSON, which is ingested by jQuery and works together with the Mapbox API to produce this tabbed pop-up. So as you can see here, Golden Gardens was a very popular spot. There are 6 people associated with this one place. You can click on any of those people's names to see information about them. Where were they born? What year were they born? What's their family heritage? You can play their interview right there in the pop-up on the map. And initially, we were afraid that we would only be able to play an excerpt from each of these interviews. But again, Eldon figured out a way to play the full length of every MP3 transcript right within the map. So as you can see in this screenshot, this is an 1.5 hour long interview that you can listen to, you can scan ahead, and you can explore. You also have the ability to zoom to all of the places associated with the particular person. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to demonstrate this live later on in the presentation. And as I mentioned, I will be happy to entertain questions at the end or afterwards if you want to follow up with me directly. And then one final time, thanks to Eldon, he solved a lot of the really tricky technical problems that made all of this work. Thank you very much.
Oh, and then why did Eldon move to Canada? Oh.
That's a story for another time, but yes, he's in Victoria, so not too far away.
Okay. All right. So by now, some of you may be wondering why we called this event Polish Town, Girl Attorney, and the World War II Nisei hero, Unraveling Ballard's Past. And we gave a little hint of that in the video that was made, but I suspect that many of you are here because you like solving riddles and connecting the dots. And when we started listening to the hours of audio, we had more questions about Ballard's settlers. When Maxine Shallow-Tuck, whose voice you heard so eloquently, let us say on the video, mentioned living in the same house where she grew up in an area informally called Polish Town, it brought to mind a photo from the BHS archives of blacksmith Martin Nowicki. And luckily, John LaMont had worked with us on the Mapping Historic Ballard, so he had been training us how to find things like the census record that you'll next see, which is slide 9. So he had given us the ability to do deep dives into ancestry.com, etc. So I'm going to be introducing John. He is a special collections librarian at the Seattle Public Library, and he specializes in genealogy and local history research. I have a feeling he's going to be besieged after this. He's been with the library since 2004 and has worked with the Ballard Historical Society on numerous projects. For this project, he provided background research on Martin Nowicki, an early Ballard resident, Polish immigrant, first president of the Polish State Immigration Society, and the first chairman of the Polish American Citizens Club. And if he doesn't mention it, I might add that without access to the special edition, library edition of Ancestry.com that was available while the libraries were closed, this project wouldn't nearly have been as rich, although I might have gotten more sleep because sometimes I just couldn't stop from just digging deeper. So to speak to the library's resources, here's John LaMont.
Thanks, Peggy. Yeah, this project, there's so much work that went into this, and I had a very little role to play in that. Peggy reached out via our Ask Us email form and asked what I could turn up on Martin Nowicki. And so if I remember right, this was during the pandemic, so reference work was bread and butter, at least for a period before we figured out how to get materials home. But yeah, I just really loved, the picture that she shared, and you can see the one with the windmill. And I'll confess to colorizing this one. The original is kind of dark and black and white, and this is not too far from black and white, but I really liked the way that it, displayed the windmill. So yeah, she asked about Martin, and I started digging into the old Ballard city directories. We've digitized some of those on our website, and we had access to others via Ancestry and our Heritage Quest database. Searching Seattle newspapers, there's the old Seattle Post Intelligencer that's online for free through Chronicling America, which is the Library of Congress site. And then also through the Seattle Public Library, we have subscriptions to the Seattle Times and the Seattle PI, for pretty much the last 100+ years. But all this fascinating stuff. He's an early immigrant. He's arriving in the U.S. in the 1880s. He's in Seattle by 1890, and he's just involved in a number of things, including this Polish Immigration Society, which there was some fraud being committed. Somebody enticing people to come out from Texas to sell all their belongings, to come out to Washington, and then finding out that they'd been duped. So, they started this group so that they could, actively recruit people to come and have, an honest interaction. You can see the Sanborn map, little illustration here on the bottom left of this slide. And at the very bottom, it says windmill on house or on shed or something like that. So I thought that was great, just showing how these maps can kind of coincide with and affirm that you're looking at the right place. There's this, in the early directories, I think this is an 1891 Ballard directory, there's a St. Casimir Polish Catholic Church, Sunday services at 10:30 a.m. And I didn't see an address on there, which I thought was kind of strange. So I went looking in the newspapers, and it says meets occasionally at Salmon Bay Park. And you don't see this from this slide, but Martin Nowicki's house was a block from Salmon Bay Park. So, my guess is he was somewhat involved in that organization and probably attended some of the services. The other photo here is the Polish Hall in Ballard, which Nowicki was also a member of. If you want to switch to the next slide. This just to point out, this is our website, Seattle Public Library, along the top. If you want to find the resources, the databases that we have, you can do it under online resources. You just click through on that and look for genealogy or Seattle culture and history. Genealogy is going to take you to the databases like the Seattle PI, the Seattle Times, Heritage Quest, Family Search, Ancestry, Library Edition. Peggy mentioned that had been available remotely during the pandemic. That ended at the end of last year. So you have to come into the library to use those. You'll also see up at the top of this page is an Ask Us link that takes you to the form. If you've got questions for genealogy and special collections, use that form and use the email option. You can try doing chat, but they're going to do a lot of back and forth, and they're not going to really know what resources we have that can answer your question. So use the email option is the best, and just provide whatever details you have and what you're looking for, and we can reply. We're also doing appointments. Peggy's brought up the slide here. We've got Seattle room appointments. So if you're not aware, the Seattle room is now open Wednesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 5 by appointment only. So if you need resources that are only available in our Seattle collection, you can come in. You just need to go through this process. We'll correspond with you via email just to see if there's anything that we can help prepare for you or answer some questions that mean you don't have to come in. We'll schedule it, confirm it, and see you when you get there. And then genealogy appointments, we also have those. That's really more about the family history, whether it's your personal genealogy or whether it's an individual you're researching in the context of local history. The genealogy appointments are virtual, so we're doing those online, and you'd meet with me or my colleague Mahina Oshie. We're the two genealogy librarians. So if you come in on the genealogy appointments, you'll probably get us. If you go into the Seattle room appointments, you'll probably get one of our other colleagues.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I also wanted to mention, I missed it on the last slide, Peggy, that the one before that, the bottom half of the screen is our special collections online. So that's where you get to if you go to online resources, Seattle Culture and History. And that's basically all of our homegrown databases. So we've digitized a number of local periodicals, most of our historical photographs, many atlases and maps, and things like that. So check it out. That's it for me.
Thank you. I'd also like to add before I explain this new addition that the Martin Nowicki House, although without the windmill, is still standing, and it is an extant structure still next to Salmon Bay. And because John's slide was a little small on that, it turns out that Martin Nowicki also, for opening of Polish American clubs, etc., was known to play some instrument. He was part of a band as well. And so there was clearly a lot going on, including even a Polish church. So this slide is, thank you, and I will mispronounce your name. This is an image that was created for us by, that's made up of all photos from the Ballard Historical Society archives, the photo archives that are available through the website. And it was created and shared with us by Andre Skelner. He just spent it in this last week. And so it's a representation really of, the area made up all of historical buildings, truly connecting place to Ballard. So that's just an example of another type of thing that people were delighted to have them inspired to do and share with us through the resources. So I see that people are also already putting questions in the chat. And so please continue to do that. We're going to try and answer those questions, either live or at the end. I see some people have already been answering questions for one another, which is very exciting to see. Now, another objective of this whole project, as it was, awarded by the King County for Culture, was to shine a light on those who'd been underrepresented in the Ballard narrative, because it was so regarded as, and has become almost mythically, a Scandinavian enclave. But especially before World War II, Ballard was home to many nationalities, although mostly European. And the Polish population was primarily down in an area that is better known as the Ross district. It was already somewhat industrial, and our narrator, Maxine Tuck, whose father was actually born in Ballard, the next street over, if we've been able to blow up that census map, the next street over had no people living there because it was the town dump. And a lot of the families there, they didn't necessarily have as much continuity because many of the families were going to St. Alphonsus versus the public schools. And so even Maxine, whose father had evidently turned his back on Catholicism, went to a different school than most of her neighbors. So for this grant, we couldn't include all the oral histories that we digitized. So we made a decision to feature those, especially for the first effort on a map that was way more work than we thought, to feature those that had not been heard before, ones that hadn't necessarily been included in any of the anthologies, or if they had been included, we researched the things that had not been included when they were excerpted. So what we found is stories that connected in ways that we didn't know about. So when we previewed in the opening video about the connection between a Polish family, a lumber baron, and a congressional medal winner, it was the only audio we actually have from those people is from Maxine Tuck. But she's the one who really opened the door for us on this incredible connection. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where I get to leave my script and talk about how exciting this was for me. Some years ago, I was told that there were trees outside of Webster School that had been gifted by a Japanese American family that lived in Ballard, which I did not know about. And I learned about this because the same house where this Japanese American family was and were able to own their home before World War II is still there, and also happens to have a Japanese American family living there. So a wonderful UW historian told me about this, so I became very fascinated learning about the Matsudas. And what I learned is that the Matsudas came here because the father, Sakaya Matsuda, was a gardener for Balcom. And then when I listened to Maxine's tape, it had been transcribed as though Balcom was spelled Balkam. And listening more, I finally realized that she was talking about what I thought was Balcom, who owned the Balcom Canal lumber mill. And then, thanks to Christina, who was involved in the Polish American community, and I hope is here tonight, she was researching a famous Polish pianist, Paderewski, who might have visited the Balcom house. And all these light bulbs started to go off, where we found out that Balcom owned almost all the land. Let's go to advance one here. Balcom owned almost all the property up between 80th and 85th on 32nd Northwest. And he had this strangely named home, Mossy Face Lodge, which I want to hope is just, one part of it. And he and his wife, his second wife was Catherine Larson. So he'd married into a local Ballard family for his second wife, were in practically every Seattle PI issue once it got put out. And he was evidently a wild man who was known for his cigars, his drinking, his golf courses, and leading Sousa marches and entertaining musicians in his home. Okay, next slide, we'll see how elegant his wife was. So that whole stretch along there are many other homes there now, but that was all pretty much the Balcom property. And he's pictured there with his wife, Catherine Larson, which Laura and I have examined and blown up in detail just to look at her purse. So next slide. Unfortunately, Catherine died in 1934, and the following year, there was a huge fire. And as you can see here, Balcom and two sons escaped as fire destroys home. And they declared the value of the home to, the loss to be $50,000 blaze. And so if there are anybody out there right now who can calculate for us what that value would be today from, the difference of 1934, I'd really appreciate it. Also, inexplicably, even though the house was destroyed, this $5,000 piano and like one armchair were damaged, but not burned. So they were left standing. So next slide. This leads us to the Matsudas. And so I have been really fascinated, especially because of my love for Densho, which has done the most amazing job of capturing the oral histories of Japanese Americans and those who were incarcerated. I learned about the Matsuda family. And this is a group of some of the people here. I think the blonde next to Kitty at the far right is one of our narrators who you can hear, Agnes Kath Minier. So I got really fascinated by this. Okay, next slide. And this is the home, which now where I won't say who lives there, but it's one day they looked out and saw a UW historian standing in front. And that's how they learned more about the story of their own house. Oh, we've got someone who already has figured out over 1 million. Way. Oh yeah. So that is the house. And there are reminiscences and voices of Ballard of people who remembered and who were neighbors of the Matsudas. And it is one of the rare places that I have learned, having read a history of Japanese Americans in Green Lake before World War II, it was very rare that people were able to return. And another family that owned greenhouses just north of Ballard High School, they lost their business during the war and did not return. However, the neighbors in Ballard did watch over the home and they were able to return to it after World War II. So next slide. That is a neighbor's reminiscence about it. That's my bad typing. So, and actually it was interesting to learn that Hilda M. Peterson Schmidt, in her oral history, her mother was actually from the Makah tribe over, but who died unfortunately very young. So then as I started to dig into the Matsuda family, I learned something that really blew me away. So if you could go to the next one. I learned that Frank Matsuda, who graduated from Ballard High School and then had a job working for a mill right afterwards, he was evidently playing basketball when he heard about Pearl Harbor. And unfortunately, the whole family was very quickly sent to Camp Harmony and then Minidoka. But what really blew me away was learning that Frank Matsuda from just up by Webster School was one of the famous 442nd Regiment that is the subject of Daniel James Brown's new book, Facing the Mountain. So if you go to the next slide, he was awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor as well as the French Legion of Honor in 2012. Oh, no, maybe I typed that wrong. I think it was earlier. But he did die at a ripe old age. But I had no idea. And I don't think that anybody else really in Ballard knew that we had one of the 442nd Regiment. So that's the kind of thing that just like makes me go cuckoo and why I absolutely love doing that. So moving on, I'm going to let you listen to, you're going to get to finally hear some audio.
Okay, then you went into the fire department in 47.
January 1st, 1947.
And you were stationed at the Ballard station for
25 years.
Okay, can you think of any incidents or?
Oh, sure. There's always the Seattle Cedar fire always comes to mind. That was a big one. You know, we were the first ones there that night. And
that was in what year? Do you remember?
Well, it was either May the 7th, 1958, or May the 8th, 1957. I can't remember offhand just what it was. One of those two. And well, I'll tell you, if that wind hadn't been so calm that night there, that the biggest share of Ballard wouldn't be here now. I mean, because it was when it blew, it just blew everything there. You know, and we're just lucky that we had enough guys there that could. Well, the chief told him. He says, "You guys set up a line right here." He says, "And you don't move. You stay there no matter what, till that fire is held back." And the guys did. They stayed right there with those hoses going.
Cliff's got scars on his legs from the water boiling around him.
Well, I know we lost that night. We lost an awful lot of hose because the buildings collapsed on the darn thing before we could even get them out. We lost on our rig. We lost a big ladder that we didn't have a chance to even get it out of there. We tried to get a hold of it and grab it and take off with it, but the fire was going so fast that...
Yeah, you were lucky you didn't lose any lives.
Yeah, that's right. We were darn lucky that we didn't lose any lives because, well, a lot of us now were trapped out on the outside end of that dock for hours. Our poor old Chief Martin there, he thought that he lost half of his crew because he didn't have any contact with us out on the end there, but finally about 3 o'clock in the morning we got through and to the outside, the street side of the mill, and told him that everything was okay, that everybody was fine. And I think he lost about 10 years of his life that night because he was a nervous wreck figure and he'd lost his whole crew out there.
So I just wanted to share a few more things before we learn about another person who was here with us. This is a photo that was shared with me by a family, the Completa family. And when they first came from Yugoslavia, they lived down right across where Ray's Boathouse is now. And then, as was often the case, once they'd established themselves, they moved up the hill. So this is their own photo where they've marked in. And this is a photo of the full Completa family. Their 50th wedding anniversary was written up. One of the sons, Lou Completa, I believe, is over to the far left, and they did an oral history, but they have never had the chance to hear it. They knew it had been recorded and they just thought it was long forgotten. So it had never been transcribed or heard before. And unfortunately, Lou Completa died just a few months ago. And so I'm so sorry that he was not able to hear his father's transcription. But his sons are able to hear it now, although they haven't yet. So they will soon be able to listen to the audio of the Completa family as it was recorded back in 1988. So that one is one that you can listen to. The next slide this is a photo that is from the Mohai collection, and it features one of the people sitting on the couch, who's in the middle to the right, is Izetta Spearman Hatcher, and her family moved here in the late 1800s, and until I think as recently as about 5 years ago, there were still houses owned by the Spearman family. There were 4 children, and all of them, oh yes, Adrian recognized Zetta. Izetta went to Ballard High School, as did her 3 siblings, and all of them went on to become outstanding in their field. In terms of her sister Florice was one of the first African-American administrative people working at Boeing. Izetta was a nurse. Her brother was a graduate from the engineering school, her younger sister. And then, in an interesting twist, Izetta's daughter, she was married to someone who was in the military. They were stationed in Germany. Izetta's daughter, Vicky, came back and graduated from Ballard High School in 1963. So these are the kind of connections that I'm sorry, I'm like a geek for it. So I hope that you're going to enjoy discovering these things as much as I have. So one more share, and then I'll let Mary Sheely have her say. This is not the tavern where she worked, but there is something to listening to the transcript of this interviewer saying, do you have any outstanding memories from working in that bar? And Doris Anderson, who worked in local taverns for over 40 years, just says in a kind of world-weary voice, well, I met all 3 of my husbands there. So sometimes you have to listen to a lot of hours of tape to get the jewels, but I assure you they are there. Okay, so next I'm going to introduce Mary Sheely, who is going to tell you a little bit more about one of our other discoveries. Mary lives in a historic home in Ballard and has seen the BHS through many successful endeavors, including the award of this for culture grant money. And she's been a member of the society since last century and been a RE/MAX listing agent for 18 years. She tends to put a lot of the fun into Ballard Historical Society because she's always got an idea for a new event, which usually involves dressing up. So, Mary, she's going to tell you about Vida Morrow Metcalf.
Yes. Hello. Welcome. Thanks, Peggy. I'm here at the lovely home of Laura Cooper. And Laura and I were kind of talking about how this map is a little bit like social media for the past. You can start following someone and you can get excited about them as you hear their voice and learn more about how cool they are. And the one that I really like is Vida Morrow Metcalf. She grew up in what became the Greenwood neighborhood. Her father had to petition for her to attend Ballard High School because it was 1918, so long ago. She graduated from UW and she was a lawyer by the age of 22. She was frequently cited in the press as girl lawyer. In 1924, she defended her brother and her father from assault charges and then became corporate attorney for the city of Seattle. She was described by the PI, the Seattle PI, as well known as a sportswoman as she was an attorney. So she went to DC as special assistant to the Attorney General of the United States, working on Roosevelt's New Deal. Also, she was in charge of her father's properties and helped develop the Greenwood Retail Core, as you heard a little bit about in the video. She created a nonprofit to save the Goldmeyer Hot Springs, and she was generally notorious. Vida outlived her husband, siblings, and had no children. And there wasn't even an obituary when she died. So now we know all about Vida and we can learn more. So during work on this project, taking the intersection of people and places to a new level, BHS had another opportunity. We were asked to do a new Images of America book on Ballard. The book, Preserving Ballard, has a publication date of April 18th. And the effort was heroically led by Laura Cooper. Thank you. You're welcome. Shocking. So this project overlapped with the For Culture grant in that we found new images for the map. The people's stories formed the basis for the final chapter of the book. And we're very excited that these projects can connect Ballard's past with its future. Another reason, we invite everyone to become members of the Ballard Historical Society. Ta-da. Thanks, Peggy.
Yeah, and you can see just a couple of things. Last year, they weren't able to do the classic home tour because of the pandemic. But there have been many other things. You should always look for them in the 17th of May. They do this strange thing that I'd never heard of called a tweed ride. And we just really are looking forward to getting people out there and doing things in person again. So thank you. Okay. Yeah, that was an example from a couple years ago when there was more people being able to go out in person. But this last year, the Heart Bomb just last week was for the Golden Gardens Bathhouse, which has quite a background on its own. So going to the next one, I want to do a little acknowledgement. So this has been, we didn't expect this to be such a long project, but like I said, it's the better for it. And the discoveries who have been made have been really exciting. There's so much more that we want to still do with regard to this map and more histories. And we want to be able to like take all of your ideas, the things that you find out about, like whether there's a dairy farm, and include it. And it's just the possibilities are endless. I think Mary's analogy to a social media is it's just as fun to connect the past because of a way of connecting the future in the way that it's already connected so many of us who worked on mapping historic Ballard and who've been working on this. We all find connections we had no idea existed. We find our Vita Morrow Metcalfs and our Congressional Medal of Honor winners. So huge thanks to all of our volunteers and supporters, particularly this For Culture grant and Claudia Chiama, who left and moved to Whitby, but who encouraged us to apply. Always the Seattle Public Library, who agreed to help sponsor this tonight. Matt's work on Core GIS, and all the people who've been helpful over the last couple of years. But the real thing is for you to just, dig in and do some happy mapping, support your local library. And now let's see if we can answer some of your questions. So thank you.
Peggy, I've been keeping an eye on the questions and trying to punt a little bit throughout, some more successfully than others, but I can sort of narrate some of them or review some of them if you'd like. Or
sure.
So the first one came up in the chat, and it was about a dairy farm behind her old house on 58th between 30th and 32nd. Did you find anything about that? And I I don't know if anybody did. I'll just say briefly that if you have research questions about, property history, what was there when, definitely check in with the library. We've got a guide of 70 some pages that kind of talks about all the resources. But that's just a general plug for any kind of research on that.
And I can add to that. In our research, we learned there were many, many dairy farms in Ballard, that this area was very good for dairy and very good for fruit, not so good for vegetables, but you'll like the dairies that you hear about, you'll see remnants of old orchards all around Ballard, or you'll find old trees and they were parts of original orchards. So dairy and fruit.
There was a lot of fruit. Yeah. And like Scottdale dairy, we found one of the oldest homes was linked to someone who grew up here and whose family was part of an early dairy that got bought out by another one. I think Scottdale dairy is still a thing, isn't it? Oh, so. Okay, what else?
One question was about the Icelandic Lutheran Church in Ballard. Someone's writing an article for a newsletter that goes out from North Dakota for Western Icelanders, and they were just looking for places to research. I gave a little bit of a reply about checking this project and the previous project in case anything had come up from those, and then also, of course, contacting the library because we'd be happy to dive into it and see what we can find out. Anything turn up for you in this project, or resources of at the society?
There were multiple Lutheran churches in Ballard because there were so many Scandinavians. Another place you might want to check is the National Nordic Museum. Alison DeReamer there runs the archives.
They did check with the Nordic without success, but if you want to repeat the name, maybe if they have a name, they could.
Alison DeReamer.
Yeah, just rat her out, why don't you?
Putting her on the spot. She was very involved in this project and in producing the book that's just about to launch. So she's very up on Ballard.
Great.
Can I circle back?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So in that, talking about looking for the dairy farm, one of the interactive features of the 2016 Mapping Historic Ballard was a series of swipe maps that Matt developed that would compared ortho photographs looking directly down for 1937, 1996, and 2016. There was also a physical map made from the Sanborn, I believe, from 1904. So Matt, do you want to describe how that swipe map works?
Yeah, the idea was that by using some of the earliest aerial photography for this part of the city, we were able to allow folks to find a place that they're familiar with, and then they could just travel back in time to, I believe it was 1936, sometime in the 30s, and then they could see. Yeah. Okay, yeah, then they could see, oh, there used to be a pasture here, or an orchard, or a barn, etc. And even in my neighborhood of Freelard, Market Street didn't cut down at an angle; it was just kind of a grid. So it's fascinating the things you can see by peeling back the layers of time.
All the social trails, kind of diagonals across the rectangles.
Yep.
And remnant orchards.
Yeah, I don't know, Matt, if you're able to do a screen share to just show a little bit of the map live. We mentioned that, but
yeah, I'd be happy to. Right now?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's fire it up.
Yeah. And Allison is answering about the Iceland. Okay, here's
Great. This is the map, and it's live. So it behaves very similarly to Google Maps, which everyone is familiar with. And you can interact with the data a couple of different ways. The way that most people are probably likely to begin is by clicking on a point. So as I mentioned, Golden Gardens has a lot of people associated with it. And for Robert Batley, we can see his information, there's his transcript, but we're not seeing very much in the way of photos or other information. Florence Cole, however, has both the audio, a 43-minute interview, and then some photos, a yearbook photo, And this is the way that you can see all of the people associated with a particular place, listen to their interviews, and see what they look like. If you click on a place and you are interested in seeing all of the other places associated with that person, on the left-hand side, we have a select a person feature. And what that does is it shows you all of the people that are featured in this map. Who should I pick, Peggy? Who would be a good one to look at?
Well, you can look at the Petersons. They don't
Okay.
have audio, but they have a lot of great photos.
Yeah, so here we have 4 places that are associated with Ted and Ruth Peterson. You're going to see the same information for Ted and Ruth Peterson at these 4 different locations, but what you'll see is that they have an association with the Ballard Bell, and you can see pictures of them swimming. I really like this photo. I think this was probably one of my top 3 favorite photos as we were building this. What were they doing? I love the tricorned hat and the fact that the car is up on the side of the road. Here they are at, I assume, a beach. And then this is the cover of the book. And my teenage sons thought this one was the most interesting because this guy is obviously doing some sort of diving with his diving helmet here. And then if you want to zoom back out to all of the other folks, you can do one of 2 things. You can either select a person again, and it will reset the map to the starting point, or you can zoom to all of Ballard. So if you've zoomed into the Petersons and you want to go back to where you started, you can do it that way also. So hopefully you all will check this out and do some exploring and make some connections for yourself. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that, the 2016 map is a separate map, which, covers more dots, more parcels. I think that might have been what Davidya was referencing.
That's right.
Earlier. So check that out. I did have trouble accessing that one. I was, trying to look up the Icelandic Lutheran to see if there was something there, but when I tried to connect, it gave me an error. So it might have just been user error. A couple of other questions. We've got one here about, have you come across any homes owned by people who lived at Shilshall, tucked away inside where the locks are today, or their descendants? I've read that some of the people who lived there moved north and lived along 32nd, and at least some married non-native people, but I only have one scanty source for it.
Well, definitely that was true of the Completus. And we do know some other people. One of the first people that I interviewed during the 2000 oral histories were I forget their last name, Preben and his wife. And they had lived down there with the uncle. And the uncle house is still right there, painted a bright color still along there. And there is another photo that will be available on the map that shows the Completa family along with other families living when they were down right on the waterfront. And the Polish house. So yeah, the Polish house that you first saw, that actually burned. The first Polish American club, which you saw, was in Ballard on 62nd Street, I believe it was. And unfortunately it burned in, I think, 1934. And so then the Polish American Club was located downtown. Yeah.
Now it's up on
18th, right?
18th, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Madison Park, off Madison.
Mm-hmm.
If you were talking about the Shilshole Native Americans versus the people living on Shilshole.
Ah, yes.
Yes, I have. We did the research for the book, and basically the information that you just imparted is also what we learned. There's not much information because the Shilshole branch of the Duwamish was very diminished by the time people started recording history. Euro-Americans started recording history here. We know that some of the families intermarried and lived in this north area. I'm in Northwest Ballard right now, and that's why I was pointing sort of up in this direction in the Northwest Ballard region, and there are descendants of those families still in Ballard. There's a good there's some good references, and there's a woman named Jennifer Ott at History Link who has researched the local branch of the Duwamish tribe in Ballard. And so if you look at History Link, you could probably find some more listed there.
Jennifer asked the question, so I think she was looking to see if anyone.
Oh,
right.
we're just sending them back. We're sending them back to her.
Great referral, though. Great referral.
Yeah. Yeah. History Link is wonderful.
Yeah. A couple other questions. One person asked, how does sawdust next to steam pipes ignite? And why didn't that happen earlier?
Well, there are tons of fires. And so if you look, like there was one, if you listen to the Robert Batley audio, his family was part of the aptly named Phoenix Mill. Phoenix Mill burned so many times. They burned all the time. Like the Balcom Mill, it burned completely 10 acres worth in 1940, but it had burned several times. Sometimes it was arson, sometimes it was quite a hazard, and there were many, many fires. It just so happened that one in 1958, the Seattle Cedar Fire, was as big as what was called, the Great Fire of Seattle. It was the first largest one since then. So, but yeah, I think they burned all the time, unfortunately.
Looks like we've got a few more that have popped up while we were chatting. First one is in the chat. If we know of stories of our own Ballard homes, who do we contact?
Or I'll take that.
Great question. Please contact the Ballard Historical Society. We would love to collect stories based in place and add them to this collection. So just go to our website, hit any button in terms of contacts. You'll probably reach myself or Mary, and then we'll go from there.
All right, another question here is someone who's outside of the scope of these projects. As a resident at 67th and 4th in a 1906 house, it looks like my territory and the older buildings along 65th between 8th and 3rd were not included in your work. Is there any group collecting the history of this area?
A little north, there's this wonderful group, West Woodland. I forget her name right now, but I saw that she'd registered tonight. If she's still here, check in. But a woman on Facebook has done some incredible stuff with the West Woodland group. Yeah, there you go. So we can try and connect you on that. And Davidya can speak to, as he said, the scope was really tough. We hated having a cutoff line.
Not only that, but we had a Finney Ridge resident, Carol Tobin, who's a noted planner and architectural historian. She might be a resource also for that community. She's in that group that's looking down on Ballard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we wish we could do more. We've always wanted to be able to inspire other communities to do projects like this.
There's some real hooks over there too. Like the whole Stumbletown nickname for the 65th commercial district. Nefarious stories here and there, including the large mural on the one building as you're heading west. So there are places that really have stories that want to be told, and people got to figure out where the sources are, and is anybody who remembers. Yeah.
We'd love to be more of a source. We just need more volunteers because, some of us are a little bit tired. we need to take a slight break. But not very long. And yeah, thank you. One of our volunteers who, even though she went to Hawaii, kept researching for us. I love everybody who gets the bug, get hooked. All right, maybe one last question, and we'll try and follow up with anybody.
Out the few that are here, and then you can choose. Can you say anything about the location of streams in Ballard? How may I purchase the book? And there's a wine shop on the southeast corner of 15th and 70th that was a general store, tin roof, interesting shelving. How long will it exist?
Yeah, that wine shop on 15th, Portales, that's one of the oldest buildings. Yeah. we worry about them. And what was the first question was like,
Location of streams in Ballard.
oh, yeah. Well, we can definitely kind of search for, and by reading which, once I remember who it was who talked about her stream.
There's actually a map in the new book that Davidya Kasperzyk provided that shows where the streams are, or at least some of them, and they've all been undergrounded. And as for the book, it will be available after April 18th. That's the launch date, so it's very soon.
Very exciting stuff. And I claimed that I wasn't going to work on the book part, that was, Laura said yes to that, and I wasn't going to, but next thing you know. But we will be adding more photos to the map, because in the process of looking for the people whose stories we'd uncovered, we discovered new resources. And I think it was during the pandemic, and maybe John can speak to this, that all of a sudden one day I checked and the Seattle PI had become, an online resource. And I have to admit, the Seattle PI covered a lot. They devoted a lot more to Ballard than the Seattle Times did. So it was a whole new resource. Oh, there you go. Unmute, John. Let's see. Did you have another question?
Yeah. The Seattle PI. We've had the Times for a long time, the Seattle Times, and our foundation had funded a one-time purchase of that. The Seattle PI came around more recently, and of course, the vendors are asking libraries to subscribe. They're not cheap. We were able to find funding for like 3 decades of the PI, and when we did that, the vendor Newsbank said, if you're committed to buying the whole thing and you're planning to do that over time, we'll just give you the whole thing for now. And as long as you continue to put resources toward it, you can have the whole thing. So yeah, this past year we found some additional funds to go towards a couple more decades, and so we'll continue down that road and hopefully find funding. And the Seattle Public Library Foundation is a big supporter of the work that we do, and supporting some of these larger ticket items that would be harder to come up with. So.
All right. Do we have any other last questions?
There's someone's just asked about the Ballard High School shingle yearbooks, and are they digitized? They are available on Ancestry. That's a subscription site if you have it, or you can access it at the library via Ancestry Library Edition. That's in branch only, but I'm not sure that they have every year, but they have a huge collection of yearbooks all around the country, and Seattle is pretty well represented. And of course, if there's ones that you need that are not there, we do have them at the Central Library as well.
Yes, I happen to know where a few are. Yeah. Those were a great resource, because a lot of times we can find like Vida Morrow Metcalf. I mean, this woman, she was like the toast of the town, and yet no photos that I could find of her other than the yearbook and maybe one in the UW alumni, just some newsprint ones. But for heaven's sake, she was giving talks on the New Deal. And when I say she was notorious, there are some. What she learned is really, if you're speeding, you shouldn't pass police cars because they will chase you. And her being her, she of course fought it in court. So she was quite something. There's a lot more to be unspooled about her. So I hope that the chat gets saved somewhere so we can follow up on all these questions. This will give us something to do with the rest of our days.
One person has suggested that my Ballard could help promote the book. Somebody else says, how about Knut Berger's Mossback Northwest? And I'm not sure what the context is for that one, but maybe also.
Well, maybe promoting the book. So I know that I'm a big fan of the Then and Now column. So we'll hope for a lot of attention. And
just one final thing for you. One of the clear goals of the Mapping Historic Ballard project and leading into this project was that these are replicable models. It's not easy. It takes volunteers, but we did these on not really significant amount of money, creating a survey, there is grant funding available. There's private funding available. Matt has developed 2, I would say, replicable models that is a really significant thing that your community could do if you can get the gumption to pull it together and think it through. it's really an amazing database to have. You think about this going forward, or all these files that could be created for people to put their family knowledge, their neighborhood knowledge into these files for the future. It's a worthy goal.
Yeah, we like to think of them as little boxes now where things can be safely kept. So, all right. Well, I thank everyone who's still here for, sticking through the questions. And I just hope that you're all going to see the value of historical societies like that of Ballard and whatever community that you're in, because there are still so many treasures. There's nuggets to be found. So thank you all so much.